Episode 119 this week, Who Watches the Watchers? This one, the Enterprise is headed to a planet called Mintaka because they have to take a part needed for these Federation scientists that are in a duck blind of sorts, watching the natives to see how their evolution is going. While they're en route, the scientists call and say, hey, our patchwork job didn't hold, you better hurry up. So they increase the warp, and then all of a sudden there's a huge explosion. One of the guys stumbles, he falls out of the window, goes tumbling down the rockery. Picard tells him, hurry it up even faster. Before they get there, Mintakan family, he was Liko and his daughter Oji. They're walking over to his sundial because the daughter has been appointed to keep the official records of the sun measurements every day. She's very excited about this, but when she looks up, she sees the hologram flickering off and on because the duck blind was damaged. And she's like, what's that? So the father goes up there to check it out. While he's walking up there, the Enterprise pulls into orbit. They send down the away team. They're trying to restore power. Crusher sends one of the doctors to sick bay with her medical assistant. And while they're getting power restored, Liko gets up there and sees everything. Data's like, hey, Commander, take a look at that. And the guy gets scared and he grabs the edge of the building and he gets electrocuted because there's power shortages all over the place. He falls down to his doom, and Dr. Crusher rushes out after him. The daughter runs away and hides because she doesn't know what's going on. And Crusher beams herself and Liko up to the Enterprise, where Picard goes in to see what's happening. He's not very pleased at all. He's like, you should have let him die. And Crusher's like, we can't do that. We're responsible for his injuries. And Picard didn't like that answer. But he's like, wipe his memory. And Crusher's like, yeah, I know Pulaski did that a lot. And she gave it a shot. It did not work. When Liko got back to the rockery, he remembered everything. He's telling his daughter, yeah, I was brought back, and there's this supreme being named the Picard, and he has all these servants, and he can bring back the dead, and we'll get him to do that for us. And they're telling all the other Mintakans, and they're like, that's kind of strange. Maybe you're imagining. He's like, no, I'm not. Up on the Enterprise, Riker gets this idea. He says, we'll go down there and fix this. So he and Deanna have their features altered to resemble Mintakans. They put communicators in them, so what the Enterprise says to them cannot be heard, but they can hear it. They beam down to the planet, and they show up at the Mintakans' like little clubhouse gimmick that they have, and they're like, that's an interesting dream you're having there about this Picard. And he's like, it's no dream, and he's looking for a guy named Palmer. And they're like, yeah, sure he is. But then a couple of other Mintakans come walking in with Palmer, and they're like, this must be Palmer. And he's like, oh yeah, we better tie him up and keep him captive until Picard gets here. So Troy runs a scam. She gets them to leave the clubhouse, except for this old guy tying up Palmer. Riker knocks the guy out, ties the guy up. He carries Palmer off, but the daughter was like, oh yeah, it's time for the sundial measurements. And as she's going back, she sees Riker, so he has to sprint across this like rocky terrain, carrying Palmer, almost catches an arrow from one of the Mintakans, but they beam aboard. And they keep Troy captive. They're like, okay, we'll just hold you hostage. Picard eventually beams up Nuria, one of the other Mintakans, who seems to be the leader of the group. And he keeps trying to explain he's just an ordinary guy, and they have knowledge that the Mintakans lack at this point, but they'll learn more in the future, and she'll be more like him, and he's nothing to fear. And she would start to understand, and then she'd completely not understand, and then she'd be like, oh, I understand. and then she would not understand, and Picard was getting more and more frustrated. That they finally beam down, Picard and Nuria, and as they're beaming down, they're going to shoot Troy with an arrow and kill her as a sacrifice to Picard, but Picard stops that just in time, and Lico's like, hey, bring my dead wife back to me. You can do that, right? And Picard's like, I can. It's not my power. He's like, yeah, you can. And he's begging Picard, and Picard's trying to explain he can't bring back the dead. They just know how to heal injuries that the Mintonkans do not. Lico doesn't get that. He's all frustrated, and Picard's like, well, shoot me with an arrow, and if I die, that'll prove I'm not a supreme being. And Lico's like, oh, okay. And so he shoots, but Nuria shoved Picard out of the way. He caught it in the shoulder. He didn't die, but he had blood coming out, and they all looked at Lico like, you shouldn't have shot him, he tried to tell you. That Picard, in the next scene's got a sling, but he's saying his goodbyes to the Mintonkans, and they hand him a tapestry as a gift, and that ended the episode. Some interesting notes in this one. The final scene was the first time that the show didn't end on the Enterprise. It was on the planet Mintonkan. Also, that tapestry that they gave Picard was hung up in his ready room and can be seen in future episodes and also in the series Picard. So that tapestry hung around for a long, long time that he was gifted. Well, pretty much episode 119.